Welcome to the video. In this video I want to show you this product here. Now this is something I've been really interested in getting our hands on. It's the new Quanum Genesis goggles created in conjunction with Fat Shark. Now those of you that have known me for a long time will know that I am a big Fat Shark fan. Anyway, I fly mostly on my Dominator V3 goggles, and I originally started out with Fat Shark equipment, but there have been a number of advancements from Quanum over the past couple of months where they've brought out some really nice kit. So this is the Quanum Cyclops. We have already reviewed this on the channel and I love this. I think it gives a huge amount of bang for the buck, and for a first starter set of goggles for somebody that wants to get into FPV but not spend a fortune and doesn't have all the bells and whistles, then this is great. It has a lovely field of view, it's very comfortable to wear, but this set of goggles now has a bigger brother. Now these have been created in conjunction with Fat Shark, and I'll show you a couple of the really cool innovations that are on these goggles. You can already spot a couple of them, and by default it has a diversity receiver in here, which a lot of the Fat Shark diversity solutions are at the moment. I'll talk about what that means when we get to that bit in the video, but I want to go around, show you all the ports, what it does, what it doesn't do, and then call out on a couple of things just to keep in mind if you're looking at getting these. To set the scene and the tone of the video, I would say these are by far the best HD diversity goggles that we have tried here so far. So the first thing, let's talk about the really good stuff. It is super comfortable. It has the standard kind of head strap that you'd expect, battery compartment at the back with a Fat Shark style plug. It comes with a battery in the kit and with two whip antennas. Immediately throw them away and get yourself a circular polarized antenna and something like a patch. We've been using it with the Trusted Ionways that we love, and we've also been using this patch that we reviewed recently from Menace RC on the secondary input, and that has worked reasonably well. One of the reasons it is so comfortable is that I actually spent a little bit of time talking to the owner of Fat Shark, a lovely guy called Greg, about their input into some of the design, and you can tell that they've had something to do with it. A couple of things here. The way that this fits on my face is fantastic. I haven't had to cut out the nose piece, which for those of you that have seen me with things like the Quanum V2 and the V2 Pro, I've absolutely had to do that. This fits naturally, and the pad here that goes against your face is removable, which is great, because for those of you that have had things like the Quanum V2 and the V2 Pro, you'll know that if you're wearing this on a couple of warm days and your face is a little bit sweaty, then this can get pretty unsavory pretty quick. So the fact you can take this off, run it under some soapy water is fantastic. The other thing you'll notice while we're looking here is the lenses are very different from anything we've seen before on this style of clamshell goggles. We tend to find that you have a very large bulky single lens, or we have a Fresnel lens which is nice and light, but you kind of sacrifice a bit of image quality. This is one of the innovations on this, and again this is probably the Fat Shark stuff that we're looking at here. This lens actually isn't adjustable unless you crack the case. It will go about a centimetre in backwards and forwards, but by default you don't have any access to adjust it, so it's fixed. But it does have a lens for each of your eyes, and the optics work really nicely, so it does give a great field of view. The challenge is, because it is such a nice fit, if you wear glasses they won't fit inside here. These fit beautifully around kind of a normal European face, and unfortunately if you have glasses or you need them for correction, it's just a little bit too tight in here. The screen at the back is 720p. It's interesting because the actual screen in here is one that Fat Shark had been developing for something that they were working on, and it's in here. It's a beautiful full 720p screen. You can adjust the brightness and the contrast and everything through the little menu button on here, and it looks absolutely glorious. Now let's talk about the ports. There is a HDMI in, so if you want to connect it up and watch movies on it, or more likely connect it up to a PC for an FPV simulator, that works great. Make sure it's running at 720p and it'll look great in the goggles. The other thing you have on here as well is a USB port. This was one of those things that when I saw it on these goggles, I kind of face palmed and thought, oh, why haven't we had this before? the USB port allows you to access the goggles and potentially upgrade the firmware in future. Now, unfortunately, some of the receiver electronics are using a chip that isn't upgradable, so that is not something maybe that we're going to be able to change. But some of the technology in here potentially could be updated in the future with firmware updates. I really love that idea. We have it on so much of the technology in the hobby that seeing it on goggles makes a ton of sense, because as the goggles get more integrated, being able to change the way they work or add extra features or other bits and pieces would be fantastic. On this side as well, we have the Fat Shark up and down buttons. They work exactly the same as a standard kind of Fat Shark receiver. This is only a 32 channel receiver. When it was initially announced, it talked about 40 channels. It doesn't have band B on here, so it has A, E and F is the typical Fat Shark band, and also race band as well. And the way it works is it steps through one by one. So if you are in the middle of band E and you want to go to race band, you have to go all the way through band E, band F, and then get round to race band to actually find the bit you want. There isn't an auto scan function in this, but to be honest, for most of us, once we have the right band, we tend to only move around within that band anyway. And if you're using these for things like racing, you're only going to be 3 or 4 clicks and you're going to be on the right channel that you're using. The little joystick here is for setting up the modes. Now, when this thing powers up, you only get 10 seconds to select the mode that you're in. So you can either have the HDMI in, you can have an AV in as well if you want to have an external receiver, if you want to use these as ride-along goggles. You can also then select the diversity receiver, excitingly, in both 16:9 and 4:3 ratios. So this is a wide screen view. Here we can try to look at the screen through one of the lenses. Having 2 lenses makes it a little bit tricky to film, but what you can see here is that the actual panel at the back is very similar to a lot of the HD panels that are out there in terms of it's a 16:9 720p panel. But a lot of the cameras that we use here are still 4:3 format. So a lot of the Fat Shark ones we use, some of the cheap and cheerful ones from other places, the HS1177s. The great thing is this allows you to swap between 4:3 and 16:9 mode, which is really nice. In my Fat Shark Dominators, I'm stuck with 16:9. Even if I'm looking at a 4:3 camera, it pulls it out to fill the frame a little bit. If you don't want that on the nice big screen that's in here, then that is something you can set up initially. After the first 10 seconds, this thing is kind of disabled, so you can't catch it accidentally. Personally, I'd have liked it to be activated a little bit longer than 10 seconds, because what I've found in use is that I keep having to unplug and replug the battery in just to change the settings between 16:9 and 4:3 for the camera I'm using, just so I can decide what I'm more comfortable with before I go and fly. On the other side, then we have the other end of the cable that powers it. So we have a DC in, we have jacks, 3.5mm jacks for audio out. So there's no speaker in this. If you want to hear the sound from the wind rushing by your multicopter as you fly around, or your plane, then you'll need some earbuds. There is an AV out, which is great for ride-alongs. So if you wanted to use something like the old Quanum V1s and have those slave to this so that your friends can see what you're looking at, you can do that. And there's also an AV in. Be very careful. Unfortunately, the way it's printed here is the labels don't match up with the port. So AV in is actually this one at the front, that's AV out, and that's audio out. And unfortunately, the way this is printed, it kind of is all stepped out the way. I have kind of fed that back to Fat Shark and HobbyKing, that actually moving all this down by about 5-6mm would avoid it. So just be careful of that. If you're looking at the top and plugging it in without checking, you potentially could put your AV out into your audio out and then think you're getting AV in and plug it into the AV out. So just be careful of that. So what do they like to use? Well, they're really, really comfortable to use, and I have worn them and flown with them over the past couple of weeks and give them a really good testing. And they're like all of these large goggles in that the challenge that you have is they are quite big and large. They're not particularly heavy, but because they are quite large, eventually after about 20 minutes you kind of want to take them off and give your face a break, because the way they're stabilizing themselves is by pressing on your face and resting on your face and the head strap. They will fog up a little bit, just be aware, because this is quite a closed area in here, and this is a really nice seal around your face. On a really hot day, I have found that they do fog up a little bit. There isn't any ventilation around here, so maybe that's something that you could do as a modification, is to pop a fan on to blow a little bit of air across. I know with things like the Dominator V3s, having that fan has meant that I've been able to fly with goggles in some less than ideal weather without it fogging up. Another thing I'll point out as well is that there is no DVR in this. I was hoping to add a DVR, just pop one on the side. We've looked at quite a couple on the site already, where we've actually looked at them and seeing how they all worked. And unfortunately on here we have AV out, but there is no easy way to power it. We'd had to run a power line probably along the side of this additional cable in order to get power. It would have been nice for the USB connector to provide power out. We've connected that little receiver thing to the back of the HobbyKing ground station, and it works really well. And it would have been easy for us to pop it here on the side if there had been a little power out. So unfortunately there isn't, so we're going to have to run that from the battery. On the screen itself, when it's running, there isn't any indication about things like RSSI value or battery voltage, but there is a low battery alarm. When the battery gets too low, these things will beep at you. So at least you'll know when the battery pack at the back of your head is starting to get on its last legs, and you can come into land to swap it out. So the final thing I'll talk about then is the diversity. Now the diversity on these is very similar to the ones on some of the other Fat Shark kit that I'm using. So here is the Fat Shark Dominator 3s with a Fat Shark module that has the same kind of antenna diversity. Very similar setup here. Now the reason that I'm talking about this is that when people talk about diversity, what they mean is there are two antennas with two separate receivers, both monitoring the RSSI, and there's a bit of electronics behind those that, based on the quality of the RSSI signal that's been received by each of the receivers, will then switch between the two. Now we've looked at other HobbyKing receivers that work in that way, and they work really well. I love those things, and we use a lot of these Invader patch antennas with them in situations where we want to have quite a lot of reception locally using something like a circular polarized, but then we also want to have a much deeper range of reception. These two solutions though have the same way of implementing diversity. It's not true diversity, it's antenna based diversity. So it's only one receiver, but what it's doing, it's kind of listening to both of the signals at the same time. It's doing some very basic interpretation of which one is getting the best signal and then giving you that one. So this one isn't great for if you want a lot of distance. You want real true diversity with two antennas, two receivers, some clever multiplexing electronics in the middle, and then something out the back if you want to go for real diversity and get the real benefit of both of these antennas. But it's nice that we've got the option to add a second antenna on here for a little bit more range out in front. In reality, I've flown this with and without the secondary antenna on. I've had very little difference in the kind of performance itself. So you know, a lot of people are not big fans of antenna diversity, and I've been testing both of these out, and I'm kind of in that camp myself. The receiver on this is nice and sensitive, so it does mean, yeah, if you want to add a patch you can, but does it mean you're going to get true diversity? No, it won't. I'm really excited that Fat Shark have been involved and working with Quanum to create this headset, because it has brought some real cute new things to the party that we haven't seen before, and those are the lens array, the way it's laid out, and also things like the USB port. One of the things I was hoping was that it'd be slightly shorter. Speaking to Greg at Fat Shark, there's a reason that all these goggles are about the same depth. And that is because with a single large screen, there is only a certain amount that you can do with the optics, and this is kind of the minimum distance away that you can get while still maintaining a nice in-focus image that the majority of people can use. So this, unfortunately, is just going to have the depth that we have to deal with if we want this style, unless they start doing something really clever with the screen up front and starting to put two images up there, in which case you could have a whole lens array for each eye. One thing I will talk about is the panel itself. The panel itself is beautiful, and as I said before, it looks talking to Greg at Fat Shark, it appears that the panel is something that they were developing anyway, so you've got all of that goodness at the front. The normal reception from the FPV receiver that's built in here will display at VGA resolution by default. So although it's 720p, this isn't a HD FPV setup. If you want to see something in 720p, then you need to be using the HDMI cable. So in summary, let me go back to where we started. Yep, these are the nicest HD FPV diversity goggles that we have tried. Now this is part of the market that's about to get very busy. So it's going to be interesting watching over the coming months how this part of the market develops. But hopefully that overview has kind of shown you what we found and also gives you a little bit more detail of what these things are like to live with day to day. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel and they're carefully ordered into playlists. So you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.